So Indian philosophy is very based on these ground realities ki the war will never end and all victory is impermanent. So sit back and ask yourself, zindagi bhar karne ke wale? I gave this lecture and I said, brand ka matlab kya hai? Hindi mein bolo. And they would give me these complicated answers. And I said, nahi, auqat. I have yet to meet one rich and powerful person who is not insecure. So you have Veer and Mahavir. Veer is the conqueror. Mahavir is the one who conquers himself.
This whole idea of converting your hobby into a profession. Hobby धीरे धीरे बंद हो जाता है और career, family सब चालू हो जाता है.
Vaikunt, when the concept of Vishnu is described in Hinduism, they're really talking about someone who is a serial investor. And I know that this person is the most toxic person I've ever seen in my life. And I can't say anything because my invoice is on the table.
Are you pointing towards me? Hello, I am Mukesh Bansal. Welcome to SparX. Our guest today is Devdutt Patnaik. Devdutt is a renowned mythologist, author and a speaker. He has written over 60 books about Indian mythology. He has single-handedly made Indian mythology relevant for all sections of the society. In this episode, we talk about his journey. How did he end up studying mythology in so much detail? What is his method of writing books where he end up writing 5,000 words every single day? Why does Devdutt think mythology continues to be very relevant in modern India? He talks about how he is able to take principles from mythology and apply it to business world, to leadership. He teaches a lot of courses at top business schools in the country. He has a very humorous style of communication. His books are such a joy to read. I have read only 4 or 5 of his books so far. I hope to read many other books, but in this podcast episode, we talk about many of the topics that Devdutt has covered in detail and how he thinks about incorporating insights from ancient Indian mythology and history to the topics which are very relevant to modern India today. I enjoyed my conversation with Devdutt. I hope you will enjoy it too. I'll start with, I'm very curious that, you started your career in medicine. You worked in pharma sector for a long period of time. At some point, you made a transition into mythology. And you really made mythology very contemporary for modern India. Ancient wisdom के बारे में हम लोग अमर चित्रकथा में पढ़ते थे बचपन में. फिर धीरे धीरे कॉलेज आता था, जॉब आता था, उसके में भूल जाते थे. थोड़ा स्टोरी याद रहता था, बट आपने उसको एकदम मॉडर्न बना दिया. You wrote very in-depth book and you also wrote in a way where it's relatable to people. So can you just start with what was your journey into mythology? How does one even think about having a professional career in a senior management? अब इसको छोड़ के मेरे को mythology करनी है.
So, like everyone else, even I read Amar Chitragatha and, the usual things. And then one day I got exposed to some books which told me that, Amar Chitragatha is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many more books. So it was a hobby. Really, like most people have a hobby, music or something. So आपका एक career होता है, you do your 10th, 12th, you get your, doctor, engineer, bano, that kind of thing. But free time, what do you do? So I had this hobby. But then I really got deeper into it and I realized that the stories are telling us something that nobody tells us. They're really vehicles of ideas. And I was interested in those ideas. And you see, when you're studying medicine, I had very good professors in medicine. And they would always say, read between the lines, read between the lines. And what is written in the textbooks is not enough. Ask, how are those diagrams created? What is the purpose of those things? So I had these lovely, so when you're studying anatomy, physiology, and I was very lucky. Those teachers would tell us every part of your body is designed for a reason. So you start looking at causality. And I started applying the same principle when I'm reading my books. So, and I really got deeper and deeper into the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Purans and the international mythologies, all the mythologies. And I realized that we knew so little. And so I would share it with my friends. It was something which I did in my free time. And I would be like this, have a darbar in a party, go to any party and everybody likes to listen to these stories. So it was very popular and one thing led to another. And when I was working in the pharma industry, whenever I would face a problem, I would tell a story and that would work with the sales teams, with the doctors, with my bosses. I would just give all these, nahi ye karna hai. Like somebody took over as a product manager and I said, you do these 3 things. He said, how do you know all this? तुमने तो MBA नहीं किया है. I said, नहीं, MBA में सिखाते नहीं है ये सब. So I would use very strange Sanskrit words for those people. तुम्हारा गरुड़ दृष्टि ठीक नहीं है. And I'm like, And they would see, why are you talking like this? I said, no, because, and the moment I would explain, they would get it. They would get it immediately. And I would talk about strategy because I had not, I didn't do MBA, right? So I would hear a word like strategy. I said, what does it mean? And I would realize people don't know what they mean. Although they use the word, cash flow ka meaning kya hai? So, I started going into, so every subject I had to go into depth. And I saw the connections.
Right. So you were able to see this connection from stuff people have talked about since probably ancient times, thousands of years ago, to now. I want to just also see this whole idea of converting your hobby into a profession. See, a lot of people have hobbies, but sometimes what happens is most of us के hobby धीरे धीरे बंद हो जाता है और career, family सब चालू हो जाता है. Right? So how did you nurture this hobby? Just in your 20s, 30s, when you said like in your free time you were studying mythology. At some point to be able to bring up these stories in a office setup or party setup, you need to know them at fairly level of depth. So how do you nurture your hobby until you are ready to take that plunge full time?
I never planned this career. I got opportunities, I grabbed them. I always tell these people that, there is a cobra which runs after its target. It goes after the rat. And the python doesn't. It waits. And the opportunity comes to the python. And the python, python is bigger. It doesn't move around so fast, but it waits for its opportunity, right? So I never thought this would ever make what it is today. I was very clear I had a career path in medicine, and this was something that I did for fun, purely for fun. And I had never thought this would be a source of income. So for me, this was fun. It just so happened that I was so good at it that people would ask me to give talks, lectures. It all happened very organically. See, in those days, there was no internet. Please understand, I'm talking about 1990s. No internet, no Google, no JSTOR, nothing, no access. I would go to a bookshop and I realized the books I was purchasing over time were academic books, which were written by PhD students for one professor. So I was reading books which are read in universities. But they are available in Bombay. Like nearby, there is, Motilal Banarsidass. And these are books that only academicians know. Non-academicians won't know them. And I was reading. So the man would keep wondering, who is the strange person coming near Mahalakshmi? There used to be the store. And I would say, "Mereko ye kitab chahiye." And he would say, "Aap karte kya ho?" They would think that I'm some PhD professor or something. And so I would read books that nobody was reading at that time. So I didn't realize, today when I realized that it was greenfield. I'm like, wo kya, Aladdin entering this, Alibaba entering this, treasure house. And even today, I don't see people reading this stuff. They really don't read. They have a lot of opinions without reading. Ramayana aisa hai. Sir, kitne Ramayana padhe ho? Right?
And this is a beautiful idea, Devdutt, is, कि आपका कोई personal hobby है and sincerely you keep investing time and effort behind it, go to all these esoteric places, find avenues, and eventually in retrospect dots start to connect. I think the reason I'm bringing it up is, this podcast is geared towards people who want to do big things in life. But exactly your cobra analogy is not about chasing that big thing, but preparing for it in systematic manner and being,
I don't believe you should have this whole target orientation. I want to get here is not an approach that I ever recommend to people. I just do your task today and you don't know which direction it will go. You really don't know everything that you're doing. I didn't plan to become chief belief officer of a company. Somebody just it happened. I didn't plan to be giving lectures at TED. You don't plan these things. Mereko yahan se wahan pahunchna hai. So I was very clear that I want to have a good life for which I need a source of income. I need something that makes me happy. So I had a job which gave me a source of income. I had a hobby that made me happy. And they were going together. It's just that one day wo ikigai ke circles hote hai na, wo dheere dheere karke, and then the market also wants it. But it's not something that you do intentionally. All that there was no secret.
Right. What was intentional in this case is you nurtured that hobby for the sake of it.
For the sake of it.
It gave you a lot of pleasure and you pursued it.
Yeah, I think, you follow I always follow what makes you happy. Now, what makes you happy may not make you money. So what made me money was my job. And what made me happy was my mythology. And one day the two came together, I was good in elocution competitions. So I used to, college mein to make pocket money, I used to go to these festivals to give these elocution competition and debates. I realized nobody would participate because wo log pad rahe the. But I said, no, I need to make that money because I realized nobody is participating. I would win the competition and make all the money from it. And I realized that people are not, they don't realize that life is not just your education, it's also your communication skills. So if you see, I write, I lecture, I illustrate my books, I design my books. I do many other things, which is mythology is just was front end hota hai na, uske back end bhi bahut kuch hota hai, which not many people focus. The fact that I illustrate all my books, I'm very organized. I mean, I told when I wrote my book Mahabharata, it began with an Excel sheet. So I would do things like that because I can use that. I learned Excel for management, but I realized it's a tool that I can use for mythology. I learned PowerPoint presentations and I realized I can use this here. So that's when you start using one skill in from one department in another department. I write about 5,000-6,000 words a day.
5,000-6,000 a day.
And that's what just comes out.
And that takes you, what, 5-6 hours?
Yeah, I just keep... See, if let's say I was coming to meet you.
Right.
And let's say you were delayed by 3 hours.
Right.
So I would have my phone and I always tell people, my laptop, I make money out of my laptop. I make money out of my phone. So I'm very clear about ROI. So you do everything. So I give let's say I give a lecture, I would have recorded it. Then I'll get someone to transcribe it. That can become an article.
Right.
Over time, the article will be archived.
Right.
A set of articles will become a book.
Right.
So the book will become a podcast. The podcast will then become... So I believe in repurposing.
Right.
Long before the word repurposing became famous.
Correct.
But I would always do it because every bit of information that I have, I feel it is of value. And I don't just archive it, I use archives. People use words like knowledge management systems, but I actually use it. I use archives, I use libraries, I know the meaning of keywords, tags. See, it's hard work. So curiosity is one thing, but you have to work. So I have a lot of interns working with me. They all say, sir, aapke saath kaam karna hai. 2 din ke baad they get tired because they see the speed with which I'm working. You don't expect them to be at the same speed because obviously I've done it so many times. But I said, jigyasa hai kya? Jigyasa to nahi dikhta. So it's like the athlete who's running for Olympic Games, So I'm saying, I'm the Olympic runner in mythology. So
correct. So your books is the Olympic race, but there's a lot happens behind the scenes. Like you're organized, you're diligent about things and
everything works towards that, right? So the way my house is designed, you have come to my house, whether my staff, when I hire people, when I have my gadi, everything is designed around helping this productivity because I believe at a very larger level, I feel the knowledge that I bring has not been brought to the table. Scholars write about it, but only talk to each other. And very ignorant people have comments on this subject, and which is very most disturbing. And you see some people making these very bold comments. I'm like, kuch to padhe nahi ho. So I can always yell at them and say that, oh, yes, theek nahi hai. Or I bring something productive and dilute the effect of the negativity.
Yeah. I'm really glad you're talking about this. So basically what you're saying is you have designed your entire lifestyle around an outcome. And the whole system, works towards that every single day. And the output that we see in terms of books and a lot of other methods also, you're communicating this knowledge out to very, large number of people. So I think designing the system systematically is very important. I can't just focus on my outcome, ki mere ko itni book likhni unless rest of my system is supporting.
It's like a tree, right? A mango doesn't know how much mango it's going to produce. All it knows is it needs water, it needs sunlight, and it keeps... Fir kitne bore niklenge, the flowers that will into fruit. It doesn't say ki one day I want to be Alfonso Mango, which will sell in Nepean Sea Road Market at this cost, right? It doesn't control that. What it is in its control is its sunlight, water, and the fact that it is a mango tree, which it can't change. It can't say, I aspire to be a jackfruit tree. It won't work. You should know that you are a mango tree and you work towards just... If you look and ask yourself, what does the mango tree do? It just survives. But in the process of it surviving and thriving, it creates fruits which benefit, which become someone's achar, which becomes someone... it doesn't control those outcomes, right? Those are not in its control. What is in its control is, I have to survive.
Literally, wo karm kiye jao, phal ki chinta mat karo.
So that, I always look at trees,
Right.
So in fact, because of mythology, I'm now reading more on botany, zoology, anthropology, sociology, because if you do one subject, you have to read other subjects.
Right, yeah. Because you are able to see patterns and connect the dots between different subjects, right? And see this.
And they're all related to each other. And it's unfortunate that today we study these subjects separately.
Correct.
Because we have sort of diverged the subjects and therefore your specialty.
Right.
I think more and more interdisciplinary is becoming important.
One of my favorite word, and there's a book also by the name, it's called consilience. Means unity of all knowledge.
Yes.
So I really like that idea. I mean, obviously human knowledge is so vast and growing, by the day. But the idea of that, being able to see the connected whole, which is in many ways, I think you are.
Yeah, that's something that over time you learn. You're an expert in one thing, but all experts, talk to any expert in the world, they will always say ki one idea leads to million ideas. They all say that. I've heard physicists talking about art and biologists talking about business. So everywhere you see this kind of connection.
And you talked about 5,000-6,000 words a day. Is it all days of the week? You have all days, all 7 days,
every day.
Yeah.
I wish I could do that for exercise. I can't do that for exercise. I mean, my struggle is to do, take care of, go to the gym. So you make me sit on a desk and I can sit for hours. I can't go to the gym. So you're not successful in every department, right? You want to do, I know that going to the gym is very important, but it's a struggle for me. Tell me to read a book, it's not a struggle for me. Try to write a book, it's not a struggle for me.
But I think I like this idea, and you are very transparent about it, that you enjoy writing so much, you're happy to write 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you take your time off also when you need to. Like it's so...
My friends make a fun of me. We go on these elaborate vacations and we all try to take those houses with many rooms so everybody stays in their room. But every morning when they get up, my laptop is open. So I will get up because I don't like to party late. So even while they're partying, I'll go to sleep. I'll provide all the booze and whatever they want to have fun, but I will go to sleep because I can't. I really am not a night. I start yawning after 11. So, but I will get up in the morning, and if I don't write, I'm a cranky, horrible person the whole day. So I think in my way, I rewire my brain every time I sit and write. It's sort of, if I'm restless, I will make a checklist. And this has been like, I'm those taking notes all the time. So it's a habit for me.
I'll take that as inspiration. My aim is to be able to write 500 words a day. So hopefully I'll use 2 days.
See, writing is one thing, right? So then illustrations have to be done. So each book has like 50. So see, a kitab likhte samay, you are looking at, like right now I'm writing a book which has 63 chapters. Now each of them will have 2 illustrations. That's 126 illustrations. I have to it's a production, it's a factory line. So how fast you can do, in what format do you do it? It has to be scanned. It has to be given to your designer. The designer knows exactly कि देखो ये errors है, इसको इधर निकाल दो. So it's the writing part is there, the thinking part is there, the drawing part is there. In order to draw, you need to see artworks. You have to study art. You have to, like I'm working right now on Jainism, so I'm studying all the Jain art. I'm trying to, where are the oldest artworks? And it's all there on the internet, but you have to search for it. It's not going to be...
And for your own illustration, etc., over a period of time, have you also deliberately tried to get better, or you were generally, by the time you were in college, you were good at anything?
See, it's like, the first time you made a presentation or made a business plan to today, you just get better and better at it, right? So you just by the sheer practice of it, you get better at it. So I usually don't try to, most people try to seek perfection. I don't seek perfection. I just keep producing.
Yeah.
There's no perfection.
Yeah. I have read many of your books, and I think the illustration, I feel, they're very deeply connected with what you want to communicate. So it really does that in some ways, comics were that also visual. I think in some of your, illustrations are able to make the concept really come alive. And I think that makes your book, very powerful and unique.
So you see, I'm trying to communicate with people.
Right.
So communication is not just the words.
Right.
It's also the design, the layout, the art, the lines. There are many things which happen in communication.
Right.
I mean, I would spend hours on discussing with people who bullet points kaise hote hain.
Right.
And I've seen graphic designers who call themselves graphic designers. This is a lal kyun use kiya hai? And they wouldn't have an answer. They just said, nahi, acha laga. I said, aise nahi hota hai. There's a lot of science in design. There's a lot of people, they're masters at it. I said, video dekh lo, unka YouTube mein hai. Dekho, ye font kyun use karte hai? And I would see, they would listen to me, sir, बहुत inspirational हो, sir, but काम तो नहीं करते हो ना, सिर्फ inspire हो रहे हो.
Yeah. So, your work is now immensely popular. A lot of people, read your books, listen to what you have to say, find inspiration. But in the business community in particular, or entrepreneurs, or even athletes, people who are trying to do big things, they read your work, talk to you, and they're able to both find inspiration, powerful stories, but also a lot of tools from, really this heritage that India has. How did you, arrive and figure out, those tools can be powerful, these people who are trying to do big things in their life?
First of all, when you read these books and you're reading, and it all really happened when I was in my pharma companies, we would have these people making presentations. And as they were making presentations, I would say, what are they trying to achieve? What are they trying to achieve? What are they trying to do? And what is the pattern of thinking? So, that is where it all started, because I started noticing the Germans behave very differently. French people behave very differently. Americans behave very differently. Indians behave very differently. And I realized that, we had this thing about, because I was working in an American-German company which was taken over by a French, I realized they are not so smart. I realized they don't understand the Indian market.
Right.
So then I went to my boss and said, "Inko to samajh mein nahi aata Indian market." And they said, "But please understand, you're only 1% or 2% of their total market."
Right.
So they don't need to understand the Indian market. And that was a big revelation. Because from my point of view, I was so important and I had 30 markets in India.
Right.
But from a global point of view, my 30% is less than 1% for him.
Right.
And that's the first time I realized, dunya ko uske taraf se dekho.
Right.
And I suddenly realized when I was hearing this, the word darshan in Sanskrit. Kiska darshan kar rahe ho? Kaun kiska darshan kar raha hai? Who is looking at whom? And I suddenly, these things sort of click. And then you realize, oh, this is what the scriptures are also saying, that you are seeing the world from your point of view, but you're not seeing the world from their point of view. And I said, oh, then I started digging deeper and deeper, and those tools started appearing. And initially, I suddenly realized management itself, what we call management today, is based on certain models which are coming from the West. I'll give you an example. Nowadays, if you go to any business school, and I give a lot of lectures to business school just to test it, they will use words like market penetration, crush competition, grab market share, dominate the market. Aajkal TV mein show ho raha hai Shark Tank. There was a film called Wolf in Wall Street. They'll use words like, it's a dog-eat-dog world and it's a rat race. If you now put all these words on a piece of paper, you'll realize they're all violent words. They're extremely violent words. They are toxic, they're masculine, they're everything that is wrong with society. And we are teaching our children this. We're telling teachers, crush competition, penetrate the market, grab market share, be the alpha, be the wolf in Wall Street. There is even an act of eating, which is so pleasurable. MasterChef has become violent. It's a violent, and I worked with television channels, and I know that whenever you show violence, ratings rise. And then we are saying, why is the world toxic? Why are relationships collapsing? Why is there divorce? Why is there people unhappy? You are celebrating violence. You are telling children business is war. Every corporate I go to has a war room strategy. अभी ये सच्चाई तो नहीं है. This is not true. There's somebody selling you this idea. Sales conferences में हमको जीतना है. किसको हराना है?
Correct. Yeah.
And I suddenly realized that you are being brainwashed to believe, and they're creating stress. It's like your parent is telling you, अगर तू पास नहीं करेगा एग्जाम में तेरी जिंदगी बर्बाद हो जाएगी. And you see these children getting these nervous breakdowns in schools and colleges. Because we are being told that this world is a terribly violent place, and in order to survive, you have to be violent.
Right.
And then we wonder what went wrong in society, because you genuinely believe that.
Right.
You are taught your politicians are doing this, your activists are doing this, your teachers are doing this. It's there everywhere.
Right. So this idea of a lot of, I think, modern business strategy, I think is heavily borrowed from war strategy. When you talk about building moats,
Yes.
right, or guerrilla tactics, right,
Yes.
guerrilla marketing,
Yes.
or ambush, right? It's a wait for your time, wartime
Yes.
CEO, peacetime CEO, a lot of the command and control, and just so on. A lot of things from military heritage this
Yes.
comes, but that's a convenient model is available. And when people are trying to run a large organization, they borrow from military, and then as military try to win land share, companies trying to win market share. So, but what is the antidote? What is a different model to think about these things?
So, you see, this is the colonial. World's first corporation was the East India Company, Dutch East India Company. So, we are still East India Company. We are just calling ourselves new names. But we think like East India Company. So, first, let's clarify that. Who inspired East India Company? The Roman military. So, the language comes from people who genuinely believe business is about stealing. So, if you look at American neoliberal policies, they are based on stealing. So, I can show you policies at very high level.
Right.
The way China functions, the way India is trying to function.
Right.
And India is trying to be, hum bhi bully honge, hum bhi alpha banenge. It's not Indian.
Right.
because we have had businesses in India for thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
What is business? I give you goods and services.
Right.
You give me revenue.
Right.
So I give you something and you
Right.
give me something in exchange.
Right.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
मैंने तुमको कुछ दिया
Right.
और तुमने मुझे कुछ दिया.
Right.
And that keeps creating a virtuous cycle.
Right.
Because you like my products and therefore you give me revenue and
Right.
then we keep getting efficient at it, better at
Right.
it. I get repeat orders, I get referral.
Yeah, earlier you told me like this exchange can be almost be thought of as yagna, the whole idea.
Is yajna. The Yajurveda calls it Dehi Ma Dadamite. Give me what I give you.
Right.
That's the definition
Right.
of yajna. Now, this is not violence.
So that one way to interpret it, me as a business person, should I think what value can I create for you? And if the more the valuable it is, you please, give me.
Yeah, so these words are used in management,
Right.
but as a trick.
Right.
They all use these words. Everyone uses this word.
Right.
It's a trick. It's a
Right.
trick to get a market share.
Right.
It's not coming from a genuine need
Right.
that I am, like when I'm writing mythology, I know that I'm bringing value. to
Correct.
others.
Right.
I know it.
Right.
I have no doubt about the value I
Right.
bring to people's lives. And that confidence comes across in my body language, in my in the work I do. And I know that when you create demand, people want more of you. They will pay you money. So my remuneration is taken care of. My wealth is taken care of. That's not important. The return is not important. The investment is important. So when investment becomes more important than return, then there's a mind shift. I have yet to meet business people who talk less about return and more about investment. You're right. So in business, the East India model is about return. So you keep reducing investments to increase return. But the Indian model, and the model really, not just India, globally really, at a wisdom level, is about at one time your investment has to be greater. Because returns don't matter because you're happy.
Right. Right.
You're so happy that returns are slightly, but then you just turn your return into another investment.
Right. Right. And I think one interpretation of that is in that Western model, as long as you get return on investment, it doesn't matter how you get there.
Yeah.
Whether crushing competition or manipulating policy or doing whatever, and is justifying the means. Versus when you value focus, you truly have to create value.
No, because the concept of ahankar is not there globally. No?
Right.
Bill Gates never talks about ego.
Right.
He talks about value creation. Discuss about your egos, your insecurities. All human beings, I have yet to meet one rich and powerful person who is not insecure. I mean, it doesn't go away. It'll never go away. No matter how much money you have in the world, it'll never go away. We don't have conversations on these things. We genuinely believe, I'll give you an example. You are hungry and you want food. So what is the logic? If I have enough food, I'll stop being hungry. That sounds logical. It doesn't work like that. The more food you have, the hungrier you get.
So when you say rich and powerful or insecure, are you also saying it's probably the richer you are, the more insecure you get, or tendency at least to...
Well, more or less, I don't know. I know the insecurity doesn't go away.
So that is a fundamental human
It's a
insecurity.
fundamental human need. And the fact that you believe that if I achieve, वो next target के बाद मेरा insecurity कम हो जाएगा, नहीं होने वाला है. So Indian philosophy is very based on these ground realities कि the war will never end. तो ये military कर रहे हो, but the war will never end and all victory is impermanent. So these are the Sanatan. When they use this word Sanatan casually, what it means is the fight will never end and all your victories are temporary. So sit back and ask yourself, Zindagi bhar karne ke wale ho? Because the war is never going to end. And your victory will never ever be permanent. If you just put these two lines in front of you, you are like, okay, now what do I do with my life?
So Devdutt, I'll want to shift gears and say I come from entrepreneurship world. Entrepreneurship in the primarily boils into how do you identify an opportunity, create something, figure out a relevant product market fit, figure out how to scale business model, all of that.
Yes.
A lot of entrepreneurs also, listen to you. They want to create big things.
Yes.
They want to build strong teams and all that. So what are some of the, concepts or tools you think, entrepreneurs can pay more attention to, for getting inspired from, our ancient heritage?
One has to, again, I always look at nature, right? If you define business as I'm giving you goods and services in order to get revenue, simple definition. So I'm either going to give you goods or a service, right? So let's ask ourselves, what are the goods we need? What are the services we need? And we can actually break down everything in this world to that, right? So our hunger manifests, as what is the thing which makes us alive? We are hungry. We want things. As human beings, what do we want? We want resources, we want power, and we want knowledge. That's a vague word which I will use, but let's look at hunger. मेरे को भूख लगी है. Now, when I use this word hunger, people keep saying needs, wants, and all these. These are very primitive and outdated definitions. Why do you want to buy a luxury goods? Let's ask ourselves a question. A bag which costs 100 rupees to make, why will I sell it for 20,000 rupees? And I gave this lecture and I said, brand का मतलब क्या है? हिंदी में बोलो. And they would give me these complicated answers. I'll say, नहीं, औकात. तुम औकात खरीदते हो. When you have a Louis Vuitton bag, you're telling the world that you have arrived. If you can afford a Louis Vuitton bag without the Louis Vuitton logo, then you have really arrived. If you have a Louis Vuitton bag with their logo written on top of it, Louis Vuitton, फिर आप new rich हो.
Right.
आपको पास, you don't understand what is wealth. So then they start understanding, now what is it giving me when I buy a brand, when I buy a luxury good? It makes me feel powerful. So power makes me feel less frightened.
Correct.
When I walk into the room, I'm less frightened. I feel confident कि मैंने कुछ achieve किया है life में. So I said, suddenly, what is the good you're giving? What is the service you're giving? You're giving people the opportunity to feel powerful. Look at the advertising we have. My daddy's strongest was a line for a car. How does a daddy become strong when the car is big? That's what a brand manager does. He figures out what power does he give. So you're not buying a commodity. So at the end of the day, it comes down to hunger and fear. Now some businesses say, I don't care for brand. I know some businesses who don't bother with brand. They bother with commodity, but then they are monopolistic. So they function very differently. They'll say, you want this, you will only get it from me now. So I will kill competition.
Right.
Or I will just have one competition who I'll really control.
Correct.
To give us, pseudo monopoly. I'll break monopoly in a very false way. I'll create a cartel.
Right.
Because all your goods and services only I will supply. I will be the source through which you will supply goods. So that's a one commodity-based business, the other brand business. So if you look at the top 10 people in the world versus the top 10 people in India, and you start asking, okay, where is their money coming from? You'll see the top 10 people in the world, some of them are brand builders, some of them are innovators. But in India, usually they are controlling resources, mining, so basically these guys have to manage the government and license. They're not innovators. They're not coming up with new ideas. Or they don't create brands which are imaginary. Some of the richest people in the world right now are the biggest brand creators. So they are all satisfying hunger.
Right. And in a lot of these, business in the commodities or very large scale business or top 10, a lot of them are barring probably a few, not first generation entrepreneurs. People who have been in the system for a long period of time through merit or whatever other means, right? But they've been product of the system anyways. But let's say, look at the same thing from the lens. So, today, India, entrepreneurship is very cool. You mentioned Shark Tank, that is the ultimate commoditization of the idea of entrepreneurship, right? So, speaking to an entrepreneur, someone who is, and somewhere, you have done entrepreneurship in, mythology space, you created something out of nothing, right? And so, when somebody in that journey, मेरे को अपना job छोड़ के कुछ नया चालू करना है. What can that person study or look at? What could be a relevant concept to decide कि ये करना भी चाहिए कि नहीं करना चाहिए? Risk reward trade off is worth it or not? The journey of self discovery the person will go through. How can
I think you should start noticing people around you and asking how are they generating wealth. Let's ask this question. Right from your house, many people don't even know how wealth comes into their own houses. Why is the father doing a job rather than a business? Some of your friends have come from business families. In India, they'll use this word, wo to baniya hai, wo to kayast hai. We use these crude words, but the thing is, koi naukar hai, koi chakar hai. By the way, naukar chakar word comes from the Mongols. We're the first professionals in the world. Naukar was the soldier, and chakar was the accountant who would offer his services for money.
I didn't know that.
This is the origin of these words, which we use contemptuously.
These are Mongolian words.
These are Mongol words.
Wow.
They came with the Mongols. Central Asian words, really. But the point is that how do you generate wealth? How does your maid generate wealth? How does your cook generate wealth? How does your panwala generate wealth? When you start thinking and you start asking these questions, your mind start asking, because whether you're working for a multinational or you're working for a panwala, the rules don't change. You all need a balance sheet. You all need a cash flow. You deal with debt. You deal with equity. You deal with investments. You deal with shareholders. And I've seen, I go to these big MBA colleges, I said, tell me the 10 licenses that your panwala outside your thing does it, and they're clueless. I said, hafta ke matlab batao, hafta kya hai? And they start laughing. They think I'm cracking the joke. I said, no. He has to pay every week something.
Right.
What is taxation?
Correct.
And then they don't think the bribery. I said, no, bribe words are all are moral words.
Right.
It's a flow of money. Lakshmi ko pata nahi hai whether it's a tax or a bribe or a thing. Lakshmi is Lakshmi.
Right.
So then they start thinking, because they say Lakshmi chanchal hai. So say Lakshmi is wealth is always restless. It has no value in your wallet. It has only value when you move. And I'm saying these are economic principles, right? So when you're reading the economic books, but you're not actually applying them. Tell me the ROI of this fellow. Tell me the ROI here. How much customers are happening? Every university has a tapri wala outside. There is a dhaba wala outside. He knows that your canteen is not, like I walked into one of these liberal art institutes which are built nowadays by these very rich. So I walked in and said, we are a liberal art institute. I said, non-veg bechte ho aap? So I knew they don't, because I knew who the owners are. I said, they will not allow non-veg food. And he sheepishly smiled. And I said, which means immediately there's an opportunity for an alcohol. There must be an alcohol thing outside. There must be this thing outside. I said, you have just created a black market, right? There is this, obviously. And he looking at me, why are you talking like this? I said, you're a business school, right? I want to check who is doing the bootlegging in your... And he said, but I said, that is entrepreneurship. ऐसे तो होता है, demand है. There are people coming from Northeast India who want to eat pork and beef, but you have said you can't eat pork and beef in this campus. You can't eat egg in this campus, which means they will want to go there. Bhook hai, which means there's a business opportunity out there. So somebody has figured it out. Somebody's already created the market. The logistics are already sorted out. There are people to travel there. Their system exists. Right. It's just that you don't know about it.
Right.
And that's what a businessman does. Usko, kachra ka dher dikha do, usko opportunity dikhai deta.
Right.
He turns everything into an opportunity because the question is whether I want to get into that opportunity.
Right.
As you said, risk reward kitna hai. You're desperate. So you will get into spaces where nobody else will go.
Right. Can you think of any, story or character from mythology which is about journey of self-discovery? कि मुझे कैसे पता चलेगा कि एक्चुअली मैं कौन हूँ? कि एंटरप्रेन्योर जर्नी शुरू में ना आपके पास स्टार्टअप कैपिटल होती है, कभी फैमिली का सपोर्ट होता है, कभी नहीं होता है, बहुत टाइम तक कभी सक्सेस नहीं होती है, कभी भी नहीं होती है, बहुत
sometimes in the
what mental models one can think of to come to terms with that journey जो आपकी हो सकता है genuine authentic journey है, but you're just
see, every plant is struggling to survive, every animal is struggling to survive, and you are a human being, you are also struggling to survive. Right. So there is no escape from the struggle. As I said, war will never end. What is this war? War of survival. We use words like, in nature, what is success? It is alive. It just means alive. And honestly, that's the only meaning even in our lives. Do you live a comfortable life? Happy life. We use these words now. For which you need money, for which you need power, for which you need knowledge, for which you need friends. Plants also going through the same struggle. So, if you look at the oldest entrepreneur story comes from the Jatakas, Chelini Jataka. It's a very famous story of this mouse merchant, it is called in English, the mouse merchant, where a poor man who has nothing is walking and he hears a merchant say that the dead rat on the road can be capital. So he says, well, how can it make money? And he holds a dead rat in his hand. When he finds a cat trying to get the rat, and he doesn't give it to the cat, and the cat belongs to a very rich man. And he looks at the man, says, "Arey, de do usko," and he gives him one copper coin. Kasha pana deta hai usko. So he got his first copper coin with a dead rat. And then he realized, wherever there is hunger, there is an opportunity. So he starts with this 1 rupee, says, where is the next place there is hungry? And he realized, everybody is entering the market, wants water. But there is no water. So he uses one pot to buy a pot of water, and he collects water from the public well, which is available for all. But instead of people going to the well, he goes on the road and says, if you're thirsty, you can drink this water. And they drink the water, and everybody who is going gives him a part of their goods. And then gradually his capital increases, and the story just keeps going and on and on. But basically, it's a mercantile thing that if you, jahan opportunity दिखाई दिया तो उसको तुमने expert कर लिया. In my case, I realized that people use the words mythology, but they don't understand it. They use the word management, I realize they don't understand it. They use words, all these Hindi big words and these Shastris will use and all these Gurujis use. And I'm like, even the Guruji doesn't know it because he's not really, or he's read a little book. He's read 10 books. Then you need 100 books. And then you are like, okay, now I am in the market and I'm in the market. If you read 10 books, I'll give 100 books. So you start thinking like that. I think that you should realize that you're not driven by your ego. It's just survival. I have to survive in this world, for which I need an income, for which I need to provide the world with goods and services. That's the law of nature. To make goods, even if you're not working, you are still providing goods and services. Managing a house, you're managing the house. I mean, nowadays in Instagram, I keep hearing these jokes where these children say that I'm ugly, but at least I'll have a government job, so I'll get the girl. And I'm listening to the story and I'm saying the girl is marrying you for your job, not for you. It's going to be an unhappy married life. But he's not thought like that. They're children. You don't realize that getting the girl is not marriage.
In these days, and as you know, I read your books, right? And I connected well because it's written in a very modern language. It's very contemporary, but also, talking about at least some stories which are familiar, some are probably not that familiar. Why do you think these stories are finding so much connect in modern India? Is something also to do where India is in its journey? Now 75 years since independence, we are starting to find our feet, trying to how do you process that whole where we are in the country's evolution and where does our heritage, what role it has to play?
So what happens is every society has a set of knowledge that it passes on to the previous generation for making them better. And many a times we don't even know what this knowledge is. We just sort of unconsciously transmit it to our children, right? If I ask you, why do Indians eat with a thali? You may not know. Okay, that's how knowledge transmission. All knowledge transmission is not cognitive, right? So I know we eat with thali. It's like if you ask a Chinese person, why do you eat with chopsticks? He has no answer. He just knows I eat with chopsticks. His children will eat with chopsticks. So knowledge is transmitted without knowing causality. You're just transmitting it. Now, this is what happened. But what happened in the colonial era is when the British came to India, they said that hum aapko sikhayenge kaise jeena chahiye. You all are savages and we are going to give you this new ideas. That was the 19th century view of things. They genuinely believed they had a knowledge which nobody else had. Even in their society, they mocked their own traditions. And they said everywhere we'll go, we'll destroy tradition and give them what. That's why we use words like modern. This word came and we said, we will make you modern, which really is industrialization. It's really that. 70, 100 years later, we are realizing that modern is not solving our life's problems. It's making it worse, or really the same problems are amplifying themselves. So you're saying, hey, let's go back to what we have lost. And that is where people are now going back to their, the Chinese are looking at the chopsticks, Indians are looking at their thali. And we are saying that of course, the sad thing is people are rejecting the post-modern. But we are doing the same mistake which the Europeans did. Because and I've done these lot of change management lectures, the West thinks change is find and replace. So they'll find something and replace something. So for them, change is about replacement. While China and India says it's aggregation. So it's not about replacing the book in the library. It is getting more books and building a better bookshelf. There are two different models. So I notice whenever I would be called to give change management workshops, all corporates will tell me, Acha, that was old, now we are going for something better. They never say what was old is good and we are improving, we are adding, we are creating a new alternative. They never use this word. And that's when I realized, the West thinks it's change, find and replace. It's not add. So what has Indian thought? So even today when I talk, this is modern or traditional. I said, aisa nahi hota hai. Both are doing the same thing. They're helping you survive, they're making you better. Kahin pe gyan yahan se aata hai, kahin wahan se aata hai. You have to read everything. You don't know. It's like I remember when I was in medicine, my surgery professor said that you have to read the history of surgery. And he'll say, why? I realized the 80% of the students would not bother with him. But the smartest guy would always listen to the professor and say, the history of surgery is important because you realize the logic why the surgery shifted. Why did surgeon A do it in this way, then surgeon B came up with a new innovation? With every innovation, there is a cause. It's not random. And therefore, your understanding of human anatomy becomes better. So if you study the history of taxation or the history of your industry, you'll understand, acha, why did these laws come into picture? And therefore history becomes important. So these things, I feel people don't do that homework. They really don't do the homework.
And does it have to also do with the changing identity of what it means to be an Indian? What I mean by that is, आप अगर इंडिया में शादी आप देखिए तो 20 साल पहले सब लोग सूट पहन के जाते थे.
हाँ.
राइट, दैट वाज द थिंग, यू नो. इवन व्हेन आई स्मॉल इट वाज थिंक शादी आ रही है तो सूट बनवा लो. बट धीरे धीरे लोगों ने शेरवानी पहनना शुरू किया. अभी ब्रांड्स लाइक मान्यवर एंड सो ऑन, एंड नाउ सडनली दैट हैज बिकम द मोर कूलर कि वो मान्यवर का एड है, तैयार होके आई है, राइट, एंड पीपल फॉलो इट. तो द शिफ्ट फ्रॉम कि हम लोग सूट छोड़ के शेरवानी पहनना शुरू कर रहे हैं, like how much of that, the fact that you're paying more and more attention to older heritage?
So it's cosmetic. I feel it's cosmetic. It's like the NRI thinking that Bollywood is Indian culture. So if you go to NRI, they think they genuinely believe, because the parents did not know how to transmit culture. So the only culture which was cool was entertainment. And what happens is the Bollywood culture spreads dramatically. It's not in depth. It's not at the idea level. It is at the cosmetic level. Khana, peena, kapda. But at your mind level, what is the shift in the mind? Are you still, how are you thinking? The Western model is designed around conquest. Indian model is not designed around conquest. Conquest is seen as so you have Veer and Mahavir. Veer is the conqueror. Mahavir is the one who conquers himself. You have Dev and Mahadev. Dev is the one who is hungry and powerful. So also, I want to be a god, which means I want to be powerful. And Mahadev is someone who gives up power. So ye bekar hai, ye waste of time.
So today's world and culture, how does one practice? What are the lessons from the quest to be a Mahavir or Mahadev? वो आम आदमी क्या कर सकता है उसके with these ideas?
See, the thing is, when you realize that the return on investment doesn't bring happiness to you, but you continue doing the business, and then say, okay, what can I do with this return on investment? Because मैं संतुष्ट, I'm content. That's the key word. But now the money is coming in, the ROI is still coming in. What do I do with this extra cash? Because I don't need it. Then you will find I can reinvest it in the market. I can take bigger risks. Because previously I didn't have money, so I was very careful of investing the money and I was not taking risks at all. But now that I have enough and I am content, then what do I do with the extra resources? I can take extra risks, which I don't see many rich people doing. They're terrified, even with their millions, that kal chala jayega, sab chala jayega. Because I am valued as long as I'm number one. So I want to stay number one because I feel my value comes from my wallet. And once you get into that role, you get into hoarder mentality rather than investor mentality. So Vaikunt, when the concept of Vishnu is described in Hinduism, they're really talking about someone who is a serial investor, who doesn't care for the returns, because he's thinking long term. Everything is an investment. So when you read Ramayana Mahabharata, keeping that in mind, and you realize Ram is continuously investing, and Krishna is continuously investing. And investing is not just money, but it's also time, energy, emotions, everything. Because I'm santusht, I don't need anything. Then why am I engaging with you? I'm engaging with you for you. So that's what, so when people see Vishnu and they're looking at Vishnu as Bhagwan hai, but that's not what Vishnu is about, because Vishnu is associated, it's called Shripati, the Lord of Wealth, Tirupati, Shripati, Srinath Ji. It is someone who is so affluent, but is also content. This part, the word content is never taught in business schools. I used to ask somebody, should people be content? This is sir, but then we'll become complacent and lazy. Because it's, मैंने कहा ना, अहंकार word नहीं है West में. So it's all about me, Even वो Maslow's hierarchy का top is self-actualization. सब अपने बारे में ही है. But when you talk about Hindu gods, they're always talking about the other. दूसरों के बारे में सोचो. You will die. One day this tree will die. So this is a very fundamental Indian idea. Is the business is for whom? Is it for the entrepreneur? Or is it for the enterprise? Or is it for the society? Or is it for the industry? Why does it exist? So your initial stage of हमारे पास कुछ नहीं है, you can afford, you only focused on building your enterprise. But then one day, when do you say, Acha, I am content now, but I still am making money, I have still capability. What do I do with that? Now this is the conversation to have once you achieve what you consider success, what you consider contentment. Now these are conversations which don't happen in business spaces.
Right. And this, I think I remember talking to you, this is a Western idea, philosopher king. But I think you told me there is an Indian concept equivalent to that.
Raj Rishi.
Right.
So philosopher king in the West is really, see, it's a Chinese concept actually. So it's the Confucian idea that the king should be a philosopher. Because what they meant is that the ruler, jo Raja hota hai, if he's not thinking, then he'll not be a great king. Because a king is not a fighter. King is not a trader. He has to be larger, who creates an ecosystem. So it's about creating ecosystem. And to create ecosystems, you have to think. You have to be a thinker. And that's what people don't understand. So Raj Rishi is the word. Tapasvi Raja is a word which is, in Hanuman Chalisa, Tapasvi Raja is the word which is used. So Tapasvi means I'm not hungry. Mere ko bhook lagi hai. I'm content. If you are content, will you keep working is the first question. For whom are you working? Because you're content. So then the question, those are the conversations that a Tapasvi Raja will have.
And aapko kya lagta hai, this concept of Tapasvi Raja, is it worth aspiring for? People can work towards that after achieving whatever,
So most people will say it's not realistic because they're lazy. But these are what the scriptures say. When you say, hum Vedon ko mante hain, so this is what the Veda says. So either you let's see how genuinely, because everybody I know say, hum to Vedon ko bahut mante hain. Then I explain Tapasvi Raja and they'll say, that's not realistic at all. Within 5 minutes of the conversation, they have decided what is realistic and what is not. So you pick and choose what you want. Because at the end of the day, you're looking at religion as yet another tool. Because you're still Bakasur.
Right.
Bhook to abhi tak lagi hai. So Bakasur Tapasvi Raja nahi ban sakta.
क्योंकि उसका inherent nature ही वैसा है.
नहीं, because he's just not realized that other people matter. वो सबको खा रहा है. He sees everyone as an opportunity to be consumed. He does not see that other persons are hungry and they need to be fed. Bakasur आपको घर में खाना. Bakasur is just, so he's doing business for his consumption. He's not doing business to help others consume. So this conversation of consumption is a very complex in a relationship. What is a toxic relationship? When your partner is consuming you and not nourishing you. So are you a consumer or a nourisher? So these are fundamental concepts. Boss relationships, you use these principles in conflict management everywhere, where we keep saying that healthy ecosystem is where while you're consuming, you're also nourishing. Which is exactly the cycle, right?
I think this is the cycle. Yeah, this is in this conversation alluding to this idea of, once you have generated enough surplus, all your needs are met, bhook shant ho gayi hai, right? And you still have the ability to generate more resources, uska aap kya karoge? Like that, figuring that out is probably a very...
But you see, how does the West function? We are saying that the richest man, we have these fortune lists and all that kind of things. And then you start feeling I'm important because I have more money than others. So then I'll never share that money, no? Because if I'm respected for having more money than you, then you're basically encouraging me to hoard rather than invest. And that's what you see around the world. You see around the world, because when I hoard, I can control you. So hoarding, and across the world we talk about 1% controlling 90%. Why? Because you genuinely respect people who have more money rather than respecting people who invest more.
And do you think here somewhere is relevant this whole idea of Vanaprastha, Indian culture, maybe the last quartile of your life, you give up everything and go to one is like...
So it's not physical, right? Okay. It's like, I know people who will say, Devdutt, mera to ghar hai in Dwarka or Banaras. They'll use some religious place like Kashi and we have got this mansion there. Main sab chhod ke wahin pe chala jaunga last mein. And I know that this person is the most toxic Bakasur I've ever seen in my life. And I can't say anything because my invoice is unstable.
Are you pointing towards me?
But we fool ourselves. The thing is, we fool ourselves. The point is, you don't have to leave anywhere to be in Vanaprastha. You can live anywhere, and it's a mental status. How am I looking at my business? Why am I investing in this business? Because I know my needs are X, but this is for me investment. When investment and generosity sort of merge, magic happens. And generosity is because return on investment, it's not like a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, because that's the Western model, right? Charity is the word they use. Charity without internal transformation. Because internal transformation is personal, it's subjective. I can't tell the word, I don't want to sell myself. It's a very personal, private journey where you realize that, bhaiya, I'm not going to be there forever. So you see top businessmen who can't relegate business control, who can't delegate. If you can't delegate, what will you do? Investment, generosity.
So let's say someone has a somewhat of interest in this internal transformation. where can they start? What does the...
At any level, it's like you're a manager in a company and you're working and you keep helping your team around you becoming great leaders. When you invest in other people and you realize that investment comes back to you and you're rising above, then you're in a good place because your success is an outcome of other people's success. And that's a virtue cycle. When your success is an outcome of other people's success, you've created a virtue cycle. And we should focus on creating success around us. That, if I started a school, I'll say, hey, how do I get my teachers to be such great teachers that people will come here to learn how to teach, not just to become students. But I'll create an ecosystem of such brilliant teachers that dunya aayegi mere paas ki how do you create these great teachers? Not that I have a big building and I've got 5,000 students. The magic is when you create such wonderful teachers that you have to now create another institute where people will come to learn your model of teaching. So it's not about building 10 schools and having more students, because that's a model very different from saying that I will create, because it's looking at human beings. In a school, I'm giving you an example of a school that I've built. You can build a school, you can make the technology, but the magic is with the teachers. That's what Finland has done. They've created the best teachers in the world. So you create an ecosystem and then you create another institute. फिर और पैसे आए because your great brand हो गया, ये हो गया. Say, okay, now let me do a school where I can do free, but I'll only get students of a particular caliber because free education होगा, but they have to be in exchange, because this red is very important. See, Indian thought is always about exchange, nothing free. There is no concept of charity. Everybody is in debt. It's not that garibon ki madad karo is an incomplete sentence. It is, I have to uddhar karo, enable him to generate wealth so that he can help others, is a very different conversation versus help the poor. Help the poor is a useless sentence. Enable the poor to enable other poor people is now a loop.
When you talk about, this Indian philosophy is able to take a very long-term perspective. Somewhere, what comes to my mind, we have these ideas of multiple yugas, the whole world going to cycle, even rebirth and all of that, depending upon, whether what's your perspective. But we, at least Indian mythology talks about a lot of this concept. In your mind, does it, all those things are indication of, long-term?
So let me explain it by using a neuroscience.
Okay.
If you read the latest research on the human brain, we have always wondered, and it's a big mystery, why do we have a left brain and a right brain? And a lot of data has been collected, but its analysis has been like about 20, 30 years ago, someone came up with the idea the left brain is logical and the right brain is emotional. That has been discredited. Nobody accepts that. But of late, people have realized, and there's been scholars who have written on it, who have said very clearly the left brain is based on focus. Right brain is based on perspective. Left brain is utilitarian. कि अभी जिंदा रहना है, क्या क्या करना है. So it's very short term. It's like a short memory, quick. Right brain is keep a lookout for new opportunities, new threats, new tools. It has no purpose, immediate purpose, but it has a wider purpose. It's called the watchtower of the brain. It's a watchtower, keeping an eye on what's going on, or foot soldier and watcher. Foot soldier and watcher. What is that? Western philosophy values the foot soldier. Indian philosophy values the watchtower. You need both. So for a project management, Western philosophy is great because there's a finish, turnkey project जिसको बोलते हैं. There's a beginning and there's an end. शुरुआत होगी, खत्म होगी. Indian thought there is no शुरुआत, there is no ending. So that's perspective. So you need both. So when I talk to a Western scholar, I talk about Indian philosophy. But you know what they hear? Which is better? It's basically saying is left brain better than right brain. तो पढ़ाई कर रहे हो तो philosophy के सिर्फ दोनों को इस्तेमाल करना पड़ेगा. You have to use both. And this is something that very few people understand. You have to keep, it's like khatta or meetha. It's not khatta or meetha. It's khatta and meetha. And there are different types of khatta, there are different types of meetha. And this is what people are saying, मेरे को template दे दो, तो मेरे को वो क्या 21 question set दे दो, मैं रट्टा मार के exam pass करूँगा. ऐसे तो entrepreneurial नहीं बनोगे.
Right, correct. This, I want to ask you about 80s में रामानंद सागर से रामायण के लिए interest शुरू हुआ था. And since then, we have not looked back. So many permutations, you have also written so eloquently about, both the epics. What makes these epics so absolute timeless and relevant and everyone is able to relate to them?
Let me give an example of, since you are associated with Myntra. So I buy a shirt. And why do I buy shirts? I buy shirts at the very level शरीर को ढकने के लिए, just to cover the body. It's a very fundamental level. Second is to protect my body from weather conditions. Third, I want to look good. Fourth is brand. I can tell my friends I have something that they don't have. Rarity. So khadi wala mein kharidu, handloom kharidu. It's all branding, positioning. Ramayana is something like that. We have to ask ourselves, why do we like Ramayana? Is it branding and positioning? कि देखो मैं Indian हूँ, मुझे रामायण पता है. My book is better than your book. Or is it because you've understood that helps you cover your body better? It's smarter, healthier. How do you look at Ramayana? So most people look at it as chauvinism, cultural chauvinism. हमारा culture greater है. And I keep asking, अच्छा तो रामायण में क्या सीख मिली? It's my favorite example. एक समय था, एक राजा था जिसकी 3 पत्नियां थी. Because there's family values. I give the sentence and they go, नहीं वो पार्ट नहीं. ऐसा कौन सा पार्ट बोल रहे हो आप? बस पहला तो ये से शुरू होता है. एक राजा था जिसकी 3 पत्नियां थी. And then the room just goes quiet because they want to tell children, आप बच्चों को पढ़ाओ. ऐसे बच्चों को ये पढ़ाओगे? And then they get very nervous. They get very, sir, Devdutt, you are very controversial. I said, क्या controversial? मैंने तो वही बताया जो रामायण में लिखा हुआ है. I said, you are getting a cultural kick out of it, that this is my culture. Then there are people who use it as, for time pass, chai coffee conversations ki Ravan अच्छा था, Ram अच्छा था, this one good. A lawyer-judge conversation. But you have to ask yourself, why was Ramayana composed? When was it written? What was the purpose? Then you'll realize that these Ramayana and Mahabharata were 2 epics that were created between the 3rd century BC and 300 AD. It was the manual of kings. So if you want to be a Raja, let's say a king is ruling and he's got 10 children, he will tell those children, just Panchatantra hota hai, you teach Ramayana and Mahabharata to discuss so you understand what makes a great king. तुम्हें रावण बनना है, तुम्हें दुर्योधन बनना है, तुम्हें राम बनना है. Why did Bharat do what he did? And you start asking these questions. When you start asking these questions, your mind evolves, neural networks are formed. You start thinking about Ram किसके लिए कहा? Actually, Ram का ambition क्या था? I asked this question to somebody. Ram का ambition क्या था? And there's no answer. I said, why is Ram king? They बहुत अच्छे थे. I said, merit? They'll say, हाँ. I said, no, it's because he was the eldest son. There was no merit. Because सूर्य वंश में जो भी बड़ा लड़का होता है, वो राजा बनता है. So it was a just accident. And then they're quiet in the room. I said, देखो, you are asking me to teach you Ramayana, but when I start asking you difficult questions, you are just sitting there. I've read the Ramayana 10,000 times, but you're not answering these questions. But that is how you understand Ramayana. You ask questions, you ask fundamental questions. They'll always tell me, Devdutt, तो सीता को त्याग क्यों किया था? I said, पहले मेरे को ये बताओ ना, वो राजा क्यों थे? Like, how did he become? It's not merit. It's pure chance accident. So, you can't answer this question, but you want me to answer this question. See, this is the thing. We are looking for answers because we think it's about Ramayana. It's not about Ramayana. It's about our life. When the Ramayana, it's an investment. I read Ramayana as an investment to be a better person.
Right.
Not to tell people कि देखो ये branded shirt पहने खरीदा है.
So your point is that people can, Ramayana is obviously a very colorful story. There are a lot of characters, a lot of nuances. कि आप उसको पढ़ो और सोचो उसके बारे में.
और 2000 साल से भारत में ये चल रहा है. It's at the conservative estimates for 2000 years. Every king in India, see in the old days they didn't have the management. Every king in India would read the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These 2 epics. The oldest temples have these images. Why? Not the Panchatantra, not the Jatakas. They were also from India. Hitopadesha. None of them were part of temple literature. None of them were part of royal literature. Only Ramayana and Mahabharata was part of every king, whether it's Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, Cholas, Gajapati. You tell me the name of the historical king, he would talk Ram, Tapasvi Raja, Raja Rishi. Everywhere this word is being used. They're talking about kings. Like Europe has King Arthur. When you go to Middle Eastern countries, they'll talk about Suleiman. तो ऐसे सुलेमान का मतलब क्या है? दाऊद का मतलब क्या है? So when you go to Middle East, I will not tell Ram, because they won't understand. But the moment I'll say Suleiman, they'll we understand what you're meaning. So I had an American audience the other day. I said Suleiman or Saul. So my friend said Solomon or Saul. And my Indian colleagues were like, what were you talking about? We didn't understand. I said, but they understood, no? ये audience को कुछ अलग भाषा बोलनी पड़ती है. So we have to ask ourselves, why are we looking at the shirt? Let me go back to the shirt metaphor. ब्रांड खरीद रहे हो या मुझे कंफर्टेबल क्लोथ्स चाहिए so as I can be more productive in my life. So we have to ask why we are buying, and for me that's very important. The ROI concept I use everywhere.
But since you have studied these things very closely, a lot of nuances, it's probably given that you have yourself asked these questions, what is your overall take from what does this literature? I mean, they were obviously, you're saying that kings used to understand what does it mean to manage a large kingdom, what are nuances, what are relationship, inheritance and so on. A lot of complicated issues are dealt in the story format, and it was useful to kings then. Today, when somebody reads it, someone who's really genuine, is willing to ask these questions, what should be their motivation?
Right? See, the problems of life have not changed. Technology has changed. Problems have not changed. अभी भी भाइयों के बीच में लड़ाई होती है, right? Even today, बंटवारा के ऊपर, go to any court in India, go to the richest families in India, business property disputes are happening. Now let us look at it. We read the Bible, Cain and Abel, property dispute. Isaac and Esau, property dispute. Everywhere when you read the stories, in Ramayana it's Ramayana, Kurukshetra, Pandav, Kaurav. So basically these books are talking about those fundamental, primal human issues, which just because you have $1 million in your bank or you have the best cell phone will go. No, jealousy won't go away. I mean, I keep giving this joke in my lectures that Elon Musk cannot create an app that reduces jealousy. Right? Apple can create a technology that will say that don't look into people's eyes, look into my eyes. So that's what Apple, we are creating technologies but they cannot say that, hey, I will create a technology that will make you less jealous, which will make you more content, which will make you less angry. Yet we have not figured that technology out, and we don't think that's a battle worth pursuing.
And last few thousand years, and you're absolutely right, human nature has not changed, whether you look at ancient Greek philosophy or Indian philosophy.
It's the dead rat, no? Bhook to lagi hai. Market is about hunger. If you're not hungry, you won't buy a product. You will never ever, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you say, I don't bother about hunger, then you'll never succeed because you don't understand that when you're hiring people, even when you're hiring people, you're offering them something, right? Unko bhook lagi hai. That's why they're joining you.
It's fair to say genius of these epics is that they truly understood human nature and able to translate into highly relatable stories, which are timeless, which is continued to, and every generation people are able to relate to.
Yeah. So the story, it's also longevity. Longevity includes that every generation found it valuable. You will not sustain something which has no value to you. So it's just a question of longevity. Why does some stories don't survive? Some songs are so popular when you were a young man, there were songs that were super popular, forgotten. Films forgotten, stories forgotten because they're not relevant anymore. You don't realize who was the richest man in India 500 years ago. But Ramayana Mahabharata. I mean, there were people, there is this very famous banker called Virji Vora who was like 8 million pounds 400 years ago when he was banker to the East India Company, to the Mughal Empire. How many people know him?
Never heard of him.
Richest man in the world. Indian. Virji Vora.
500 years ago.
500 years ago, in Mughal times. When the East India Company was just entering the market, they said the richest man in Surat, I think it's in Surat or Ahmedabad. I don't know, if you do a Wikipedia search, you'll find out about him. But I have to do a Wikipedia search to find out about him. But for Ramayana and Mahabharata, it just keeps coming to me everywhere.
Right.
So we're still interested in Ramayana and Mahabharata, but we're not interested in Virji Vora because the story of Ramayana and Mahabharata is giving us something that the wealth of this richest man.
Right. And one of the topics you talk a lot about is just power of symbols. And in some way, brand is also symbol creation. In mythology, symbols, play a huge role.
Yes.
Just, how have you, studied and what is your understanding of the roles symbols play in our life individually or society?
See, it's about communication, right? When you're talking to people, you communicate not just through words, but also through gestures, through expressions. There are many ways we communicate. Communication is not just cognitive. It is also subconscious. And so you have to understand communication very well. So for example, when I say exam mein pass ho gaya, muh meetha karo. So we have associated sweet with success. We will not go to someone's house and say, mera beta successful ho gaya, usko job mil gaya, limbu lijiye. Right? But we'll say, nimbu se nazar nikalti hai. Negative energies are removed. Now we have given meaning to these words. So humans, what is special about humans? We give meaning. We give meanings to objects. So Nimbu has a meaning, Meetha has a meaning. So that's how symbols are created. You draw something on the board, a straight line has a meaning, a vertical line has a meaning, a horizontal line has a meaning, dots have meaning, one dot has a meaning, 5 dots have a meaning. So they all have meanings cultural specific. They're not acultural. They are within a cultural context. And therefore you have to understand, especially graphic designers have to study that. You have to understand the meaning of color, the meaning of design, the meaning of... Today politicians will say green color ka ek meaning hai, blue color ka ek meaning hai, orange color ka ek meaning hai. That's not natural. This has been given. So that's symbols. And symbols have multiple meanings. Signs have one meaning. Science is about science. Science is about signs. So it's only one thing. Symbols are about multiple things. So everybody will look at the same thing and see differently. And culture will try to communicate one particular idea. And the way you study symbols is by seeing contrasting symbols. So good times you give mitha. Bad times you give khatta. So now there is a language created between the flavor meetha and khatta. And therefore, by seeing these contrast and comparison, you construct the language. So that's a topic by itself.
Yeah, and given that, these symbols are such powerful tool of communication and they can last for generations or centuries, just from business leaders or political leaders' point of view, are symbols very important for them to both understand and maybe even design, imbibe some meaning into it, and just to be able to communicate on whatever, your values or objectives to...
Yeah, great logos are based on that, right? Great logos, of course, PR companies, advertising firms can just spend hours and hours doing semiotics, but basically you need to understand what is being sold to you. Sometimes you can get symbols wrong. You get symbols completely wrong. And I've seen disasters happening because you have bad symbols. Symbols are not random. It needs a lot of thought. But does it impact market value? It depends on which business you are in. Like fashion changes repeatedly, colors, meanings change repeatedly. So some places the turnover is very high and sometimes... So while yes, understanding symbols is important, but it's important to understand what does a person feel when he walks into your office, what the colors, the space, the design. Indians don't learn art. And art it's not cognitive, it's not mathematical, it's about proportions. And designers do that. And you have to study color, texture, line, proportion. These things only happen. This cannot be taught. It's not like mathematics and logic. It's not based on logic. You have to continuously experience it again and again. It's like going to a restaurant again and again and again and again. And then you'll say, oh, this is good food. This is bad food. This texture is good. This texture is not good. And I always tell people, how many of you all go to the museums and study art? I see fashion designers, and when was the last time you actually went to a fashion museum and saw how fashion evolved over time? And why did it change over time? Why did this? And only, those are sometimes flukes say you become successful, but some people understand this. And you see, that requires rigor. It does require rigor. So you have to, I think, it's the nature of the industry. The user interface is a study of symbols. How do you use the user interface? I've seen engineers design some things and I'm like, it's terrible because you have not understood human beings. He left me. When you see an Apple, why Steve Jobs was famous is because he was a great designer. He understood what should be on the left, what should be on the right, how thickness, feelings. He was very, very particular. He was anal about it. Not, I was told that I've never met him, but they was told, but you see the design or you see some of the temples in India and you can see the great temples and terrible temples. Modern temples are very badly designed. So it's color, art, but that's practice. You have to keep practicing it.
So people who are interested in communication or creating things, they can invest time and effort to study art.
Yes.
And understand some of the fundamentals and bring some of those learnings to them.
PowerPoint presentations. Which color do you use? How much word should be there on this? I see people making presentations. I remember when I was working in the consulting firm, my partner once told me, Dev, that this piece of paper is for me worth 2 crores of rupees because based on this one piece of paper, I'll get a contract of 2 crores. I don't want an error. And I figured out, and he would say that how does the eye move? What color should be used? What font should be used? Because for him, the design of the paper was as important as the content of the paper. He said, "Kaun padta hai?" The moment they look at it, they should feel confident. Now, how do you make a person feel confident with just a few things on the board? Study about it. It's like when somebody walks into the room and say, hey, he's a well-dressed person, looks smart, and this looks thaka hua. It's how does it happen? These are all symbols talking to you. Same thing happens with documents, letters. You can look at a letter. We are trying to take away that world because we're trying to get to technology, like emails, take away the pleasure of writing, right? So we don't have that. But even in a presentation in art and how you write it, lots of magic can happen. And it happens, very, very unconscious. It's a different communication tool. Art is a different world of language. So, and ultimately, see, we talk about Lakshmi goes to Vishnu, right? But Vishnu's symbol is communication. Shankh hota hai, communication. Bansuri hoti hai, communication. So, Shankh is used for warning. Bansuri is used for invitation. So, the first thing is communication. Our gods use musical instruments. Damru hota hai Shiv ji ke paas. So, communication is important.
Right. So, Devdutt, as part of your studies and writing books, you have studied Indian philosophy very deeply. And you went to all these obscure bookshops and hunted down all these books that no one's read about. And it must have shaped who you are, your thinking, your worldview, ambition. How much, what do you think, somebody like me or somebody who is a successful business person or entrepreneur wants to do bigger things in life, but also wants to find some contentment? How should they study, philosophy? Should they study first of all? And if so, where to begin?
See, philosophy is basically examination of your life. And people have done it before you. So you read other people's examination of how they examined life and how are you examining life. And as human beings, we have the capability of doing that. Animals don't do that. Humans can do that. The question is, why are you alive? And that's a question that there is no answer out there. And you have to find your own answer. I can't tell you the answer. Even if I tell you the answer, you will not receive it. You have to figure it out yourself. And that's why philosophy becomes important. Paise kyun kama rahe ho? Simple things like that. And then you start going in deeper and deeper into it. And then you realize, why do you wake up in the morning and do whatever you do? I think that is important. The why part of your life really comes from philosophy. It doesn't come from business. Business is the how part of life.
So how can one approach it? Is it more about contemplation and thinking, like introspection? Yeah, you can also read some books. Obviously, read your books for sure. But beyond that, what does a journey look like?
I think thinking about everything that we do, a little bit of, sometimes we are so busy, which is fine. But I think spending at least a few, जब बोलते हैं ना ध्यान करो, भगवान के ऊपर ध्यान करो. But basically it means that just examine your life. Some people write a diary. Sometimes you sit down and ask yourself, how do I bring value to our life? I think that question is very important to ask. To live a fulfilled life. Life is not about the food that you have and the position that you have, your estates and your titles. Those are important things. Those are functionally important things. Money gives you comfort, position gives you respect. But what more than that? If you walk into a room and nobody recognized you, will you still be comfortable? It's a very famous Chinese sentence. Can you live a life unrecognized? I find that very powerful and disturbing sentence. Yesterday I was at a party and, a young boy who was a doctor was asking a friend of mine, and my friend is worth a few 100 crores. And my friend, he said, so what do you do? And, it was this moment where I'm like, tum jante nahi ho kisse baat kar rahe ho? But that boy didn't know. And my friend answered very graciously, I work in PR and I do this. And I was just explaining this thing. And I'm like, yeah, but life is like that, right? We assume that we are recognized because we have done these things. Hamare ped pe itte phal hai. But people don't know who you are. And it's okay for them not to know, because one day you will be unrecognized. You'll be forgotten. These things are the source of our insecurities. These are the sources of our negativity, which we not only carry within us, but we spread around us. I'd rather we spread positive things around us. This whole military culture that we have decided. Why do you need a military? Because you feel there are people killing out to get you. Wouldn't it be smarter not to have enemies? Yeah. I always tell people that the Jewish people are the most successful people in the world, most intelligent, most power, Nobel Prize, sab kara hai. But they just don't seem to be making a lot of friends. That art seems to have gone. And you're proud of having weapons rather than creating friendships.
Right.
Right. So you have to decide where you want to invest your time and money in creating weapons. तुम्हारे पेड़ में इतने कांटे होने चाहिए, कोई तुम्हारे पास नहीं आए, या इतने फल होने चाहिए जिससे लोगों को सुख समृद्धि हो आपके यहाँ. And that in Sanskrit is called Mangalya. Mangalya is a tree which, is like we worship the mango tree and the betel nut tree and the coconut tree. We say every part of this tree is valuable. The coconut tree has no thorns. Mangalya, banana tree, no thorns.
One can aspire to be at that Mangalya tree.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to be, at least try to create, every tree has its value. I'm sure somebody will find some value in the venom that you produce. That is also, I'm sure, a value. But I think I would like to be a tree that brings value to other people. I don't want to be a tree that is full of thorns.
Right. And are you able to find time in your own life for this contemplation? जब आप ना तो पढ़ रहे हैं ना लिख रहे हैं, but खाली सोच रहे हैं, are you able to do regularly?
See, at the end of the day, this is important, right? Like, you give a lecture and everybody ताली बजाते हैं. And you feel very nice. And then you're like, next time lecture देते हो और ताली बजता है. Then you get addicted to the ताली. फिर ताली के लिए काम करते हो तुम. And then you start asking yourself कि अच्छा ताली नहीं मिली तो तुम क्या करोगे? And those are my moments of contemplation. The reminder that, why are you doing this lecture? What is the purpose? Achha, the money is there, the fame is there, but, can I walk into a room where nobody recognizes you, where nobody cares for your work, doesn't feel you bring value to the table? What will it do to me? Are you still calm? Are you still composed? Or do you feel restless and nervous and terrified? And then you realize, oh, you're not really evolved emotionally. So it's not just about, physically we are aging. Financially we are growing. But emotionally, what is happening to us emotionally? Those are very private, subjective conversations. So measurable is my economics. Measurable is my body. But what is not measurable is my mind. And I would like that mind to be a happy person when I die.
Oh, excellent. I think this is a good reminder for self also. I think I would like to have more contemplation time because we all have a tendency to get busy with things morning till night and then suddenly, year after keep passing by and then not getting a sense of what's happening. I have, Devdutt, I got introduced to, mythology mostly through your books and I've immensely enjoyed reading all the books I have read. I have not read all of them. You write so fast, I can't keep up. But I think what I realized, Indian mythology is so fascinating and so diverse and so broad. And you've invested decades, studying it. I'd love to be able to come back and talk to you about some of those topics in a lot more detail and just, go deeper into themes which are very relevant for modern India, for, youngsters, for policymakers. This whole idea of Amrit Kaal we are talking about, is this happening one more time? What to think about it? There love to, go deeper into these topics. So really, want to thank you for taking the time for this conversation. I think we covered a lot of topics. I immensely enjoyed. I think learned a lot from it, took some mental notes. I really look forward to having you back and having a more detailed discussion. Thank you, Binch.